What is up, Facebook land? Welcome to another edition of Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Cubbler. And before I introduce my amazing guest, Jess Regner, I want to first dedicate a show, like I always do, in honor of Jess and the work she does with fostering and adoption. I want to dedicate the show to anybody who's ever had to make the decision to put their child up for adoption or chose to save a life by adopting a child. I am been touching my family where I have two nephews. My wife's sister, who passed away 3 years ago, she had adopted two children. Nathan's the oldest, he's 17, and Jack, he's 13. Jack's from, where's he from? Guatemala, and he's Mayan, 100% Mayan, which is pretty cool. And then Nate was born here, but his parents were high school students, very smart. One was Vietnamese, one was Puerto Rican Italian. So I call him the shopping cart. He's got everything in him. So my show is dedicated to anybody who's decided to save a life by either giving up a child for adoption or adopting a child. The podcast, where can you find it? You can get it anywhere. Podcasts are found, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, you name it, it's there. Now, a little bit about Jess. I will admit that we're friends, and we've known each other for 10 years, maybe 11 years. And her husband, Doug, was my daughter's principal in high school, and he's a client of mine and a good buddy. So there is some history here with us. But there's things that I don't know about her that I actually found out something new today that we'll talk about. But Jess is amazing. She is a corporate person. She left corporate world. She was very successful there, took two companies, built them up to being great, and decided that world wasn't for her, that her three children at home needed a mom and her husband needed a wife, and she just wanted to experience life on a different level. And she made the decision to leave corporate world and go with a small startup company that was in the health nutrition world called Isagenix. And she started building a network and a base here in the Royersford, Pennsylvania area, and built her team to over 11,000 people. She's changing lives every day through financial advancement, through health gains. And she's just a whirlwind there. And then she's also an amazing mother, an amazing wife, and a very big person in the community. And she's about 3 years ago, started fostering, and she's doing amazing things there. And actually, they're in the process of adopting one of their foster kids. And she just took on, I don't know how she's away. She just took on a new infant boy who is now with them for temporary for right now, and just open up their hearts to anybody who needs a family that's willing to give their heart. So without further ado, my good friend, Jess Regner.
Hello there. Thank you so much. This is an honor.
I think it's gonna be fun. I when I said, okay, I want to get Jess on, I didn't know when. I try to strategically plan out the podcast so I'm not putting a bunch of people in the same genre together weeks after week. So I was trying to figure out where I wanted you to pop in, and this is a perfect timing. And I'm glad you were able to do it. And one of the things I found out today. So my brother. Everybody here knows about my brother's story, how he passed away. But my brother went to school, which was a fledgling brand new school called Westmont Christian Academy in the late 80s. And it was very small. It was, there were multiple grades in one classroom, and they had video teachers. They had proctors that would sit in a room, and they had a video teacher teach classes. And it was good for my brother because he stuttered and he had autism. And it was just socially, it was tough for him in a classroom environment. So it really helped him. And I didn't know until I posted something today and someone commented on it that you went to Westmont.
It's true. Graduated in 1996.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And
100% increase in the size of the school from the time your brother went there. He had 12 kids in his class.
Yep.
I think I graduated with 24.
All right. See, that's booming.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. And I didn't know that. And I think that's just a cool little tie-in on how it just works out in life. So
it was a great upstart. People want to know, like, where did you come from? Well, when you say you were graduated second in your class, sounds pretty good until they find out there were only 24 kids. So.
You're like, oh, I was salutatorian.
Salutatorian, exactly. It was a good opportunity to rise up as a leader. There weren't there wasn't competition.
That's true.
But it was that's such a good school. In fact, the only thing about it, though, I say, and you know this, is that school is no longer there. There's moved to a new campus. So I can't take the kids back and show them where I went to school.
And it's so after when I ran across New Jersey, um, I needed to raise money for charities. And one of the things I was doing with my book was I raised money for a place called where my brother worked called Camp Anaba, which is a Christian camp out in Chester County. And then also for a special education program at Westmont Christian Academy, where we went to high school. And, it was an honor for me to be able to help families who couldn't afford to send their kids to Westmont because they couldn't afford the special education program, to be able to fund that for them through the sale of my brother's book. So that was, even though I never went to school there and I had no real association there other than my brother, it was cool to be able to offer that and bring that to them for the few years I was able to do it.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thanks.
All right. So we're going to go a deep dive into Jess Regner.
Oh, geez. Okay.
I'm sure you've done interviews before and been on shows before. My goal is not to give a business 101 podcast. My goal is for people to get to know who you are, because you are very successful. And I think behind every success story is a story of struggle, and a story of overcoming adversity or overcoming obstacles. And I just like to get a little bit deeper into who you are and where you come from. So let's go back to where you grew up. You grew up in Pottsgrove and then Douglasville area and that whole area.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
Douglasville, Amity Gardens.
Amity Gardens. I know that very well.
Gardens, Lake Drive. I'm an only child, born to amazing parents. My mom and dad, and my dad had testicular cancer, and they told my parents that they may never get pregnant. And when fertility wasn't really a thing, they drove to New Jersey. Imagine from Pottstown, Pennsylvania, to drive to Cherry Hill, New Jersey to see a fertility specialist with a lot of visits. And I was really their miracle baby. They wanted to have more children and just couldn't. And they raised me. People say like, oh, people have problems in their childhood. And I got to say, like, they raised me like a friend that I was sufficiently scared of them, but they raised me as like, I could tell them anything. Mm-hmm. And I think people say like, what's the best gift you ever got from your parents? And they gave me this unbelievable money blueprint. Like, I had no idea, Matt, until a couple of years ago. I thought we were rich. And my mom, a couple of years ago, we were talking about it, and I was like, Mom, I really thought we were rich. She's like, I have no idea how you possibly thought we were rich, but I really believe, I had no concept. There was never, they really believed that, I could do anything. And they told me that all the time, and I believed them. They gave me this great money blueprint.
So your mom, and you obviously had your mom and dad, and you were an only child.
Yeah.
Right. Now, extended family. Did you have a lot of cousins? Like, what was it like because I'm now an only child, but I wasn't growing up.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that's like, but I don't know what it's like to have cousins or anything like that, because I don't have any, growing up, I didn't have any relationship with my cousins. So what was it like as your youth aged Jessica Regner?
So my mom and dad each had one sibling. And so I have amazing first cousins, and I have cousins that were really raised really close to me. But one of them's 11 months difference. We're 11 months apart. And we were raised as close to as a sibling as I could have, as my cousin Heather. And I will say that I just longed for I just thought what is awesome. Big families just amazed me. But that wasn't anything. I read a lot of books. People that see me on stage think I'm really outgoing and I'm a total partier. And I like to read and be quiet. I look around at my chaotic house and think to my kids, don't you want to have a little quiet time by yourself? But no, it was I had a typewriter. I wrote a lot. I read a ton of books. My mom worked in a nursing home. And so I would go with her and I would sit in the lobby for hours every day, in a nursing home lobby. What's there to read? Reader's Digest and Zig Ziglar books. And so people want to know, like, how do you have these sales skills? Well, I love to read. And the only choices in the lobby of the nursing home was Reader's Digest or Zig Ziglar.
That's crazy. I never even
autobiography.
I would have never thought about Zig Ziglar being in a, but I guess you're right. You think about that.
Absolutely. So you'd have How to Win Friends and Influence People. You have a little Dale Carnegie in there. And just a lot of people are surprised to hear, like, I've read so many personal development books because that was the only choice. I had hours to kill. I did a lot of, I used to hang around. People laugh because they're like, I used to hang around with adults. Well, I used to hang around with geriatric patients. And I was so close to them that when I went to their funerals, I was probably more upset than their families. I spent so much time with them every day in the summer. I'd be there with my mom. You know, this woman, Arena DeBella. I like to track down her family, because she was like a family member to me. When she passed away, her and like this guy named Eddie, I used to sit and play cards with them, sing songs with them, take them to the activities of the nursing home. And I was just so close to these two people.
Let me ask you this. So not a lot of people know home Royersford Jess, right? They know big stage Isagenix, 10,000 people,
Yeah.
doing sales calls and doing the masterminds and all these things that you're doing, that you're
Right.
leading people. But in your home, I get a firsthand, well, secondhand through Doug, account of what's going on in your house on a weekly basis. And people don't recognize, or maybe not realize that unless they're friends with you, that your kids are very socially aware.
That's true.
Like, your kids understand the bigger picture, which is very rare for kids, especially at their age, to have an understanding of what poverty is, what people who are hungry are, and volunteering in order to have a servant attitude. Like, your kids, that's one of the things I'm very impressed with is and it's not let me quick comb your hair, take a picture and make it look like everything's great. They're really out doing those things. And you post on, your kids have their, at the holidays, what they're thankful for. And they write this stuff down. They're very aware of their emotions and aware of things that are real. And I think that's cool. And do you think that comes from being with your mom at seeing the geriatric world and having those relationships with people that, like you said, they're closer to dying than they are being born.
Yeah.
And one thing I talk to my kids about, and maybe you can agree, I think in order to really appreciate life, you have to experience death. I don't think, I have friends that were in their late 20s before anybody in their family ever died, and they didn't handle it well. And now I can tell you firsthand that I didn't handle my brother's death well, but I had a lot of death in my life as a young kid. I mean, two of my grandparents died when I was 10, and so I had a lot of death, and my kids have had a lot of death. Unfortunately, they had to watch their aunt die, and I think it's made them more aware of life. And I see your kids having similar qualities. And what do you think you attribute that to? Is it just the reinforcement that you and Doug bring, or?
I think that inherently people are motivated by different things, right? And so I feel like God blessed us. So, I came home and I had a great job. And Doug and I have been married since I was 24. And in corporate America, I had a great job from the time I got out of school, right? And so I think that I was never as much motivated by the money part of it as I was by what the money could do. And, we made $1 million in this company in 2 years, and our life hasn't changed. It's the same chaotic minivan, nothing. We haven't moved. We haven't done a lot of the things, but we've been able to give with reckless abandon. And people say, like, why do you work at the velocity you do? Your business is in such growth. It would be growing with or without me. Why? Because it gets me excited what else we could do. Like, when you bring in more money, I think money can change lives. I've had a good money blueprint. So for me, I just believe what money could do, and I've watched it impact people. I will say that I think that people say, what do you do for a living? I'm raising kids who don't suck. I'm raising kids who are grateful. My goal, like my job, is I want to raise grateful, grounded kids in a chaotic world, because I believe that I look at my kids, they could make such a difference. And I think if we empower other people, that is just why I get up so early, why I stay up so late, is I think if I can give this away to other people and they can go out and make a difference, we could really change things.
That is so, you say that, people ask me all the time. I'm proud of my kids, and I think I have two really good kids. And I just say, I don't want my kids to ever not represent the things that I hold value for. Like, my kids go out every day knowing the expectation that's been placed upon them to be good people, to be caring and forgiving and humble and work hard and not take nothing for granted, and all those things that we want as parents for our kids to have. We work towards that. That's a real thing. And when I watch your kids, and I get to see them from a distance, at event at the school or whatever, or through social media or through Doug's words, they just seem to understand life at a very early age. They just get it. And I think that's a testament to consistency in how you parent, consistency in the messaging and all aspects of your life. Because kids watch everything, right? They don't miss anything. Your kids will know, well, I remember that time when you said this, but you didn't do that. They know everything and they watch everything. And you're always going to be an example in all aspects of your life. And I think one of the greatest things I see from you and Doug is you are constantly the same and consistent in all aspects of your life. Like I don't ever see Doug at school and then Doug at the gym or Doug socially. They're not different people.
Right.
And same thing with you. And I just think that's pretty cool. And I don't know if people know that or not.
Well, I think what I will say to you is just in fairness. So people people that come in this house and you've seen it. If you tell me something bad about my kids, I believe you. My kids are kids, right? But we get a lot of negative feedback from not a lot, but I've definitely gotten negative feedback from people who feel like we've overexposed the kids at too young of an age. Our kids this is our 7th foster placement that we're on, and our kids are pretty aware of what happens, the situations, the opioid epidemic, the abuse, they hear. And I share with them pretty openly, and so does Doug. And we've been criticized for sure. People that say you've exposed them too young.
I think your kids. I've never talked to my kids like kids.
Yeah.
Like I never used the baby voice. There was never.
Yeah.
None of that. It was always I talked to them like people, and I'm an intense dude. I get that, and I'm 6'3", 250. I'm an imposing physical person at times. And I want my kids to understand that there is a hierarchy in our house, right? There's definitely a separation between kid and dad. But there's also a connectivity where if you're able to have a conversation with me about something that is maybe outside of your normal 16-year-old or 13-year-old or 21-year-old intellect, I'm going to have that conversation with you because I want you to become aware of what's going on. I want you to have an understanding of life. I've been around the world. I've seen the worst of the worst. I've seen countries. I saw a person get stoned to death. I've seen what happens in other parts of the world. And that's a real thing. It's not going to be there.
Yeah.
The world is real. And my kids need to be prepared for that because I don't know where life's going to take them. I don't know if they're going to be living in my basement for the rest of their lives or if they're going to go and live in some foreign country and feed the homeless. I don't know. But wherever they go, I want them to be prepared. Yeah. And I think that's what you're doing in a way of through fostering, through understanding that the reason why we have these children with us is because their parents aren't capable right now of doing it for themselves. And this is why. And I think that's important to share that with them. And your kids aren't too, they're old enough to know right from wrong. They're old enough to watch TV and see the things that are on TV. So it's better to hear from you guys than anyone else.
I think you see this in your career too, is that I think that one of the things that we've emphasized is grace. For the grace of God, go I. And I've always told them, like, these kids are here because you make one bad decision and it could take you down a road and it could be any of us. We've watched some people that I think that the heroin, the opioid epidemic, it makes no discrimination based on economics or race or gender. We've watched some people that I love so much in, very, very upwardly mobile, professional people be impacted. And so I've just said to them, like, these they can turn around. My little boy that we foster that is still in our life. That his parents had an unbelievable. They should make a movie of their epic turnaround, and we've always treated them with a lot of grace. I knew they could be the parents he deserved, and I would tell them that all the time.
I remember hearing Doug tell stories of when you would have visits, and they would come, and the conversations that you guys would have after they left. And that's what I did sense that. I sensed that there was this hope of this. And I know how much that hurt to let him go. But I think that the love you have for him and the things that you embraced and shared and helped grow in him in his very early ages are the things that are going to help him become. actually probably more influential on his parents because he can be able to share those things that maybe they didn't have in their repertoire as parents. And
There's
I think
such a cycle to it. Absolutely. Her mother had been in foster care herself. And there's a cycle that you break when you start believing in people.
that's a good segue. Why fostering? Like when, like I remember when Doug came to me and said, yeah, we started fostering. I'm like, what?
Right.
Like your life is nuts.
Yeah.
Like everything about your life is not necessarily saying, hey, we got a lot of free time. Let's add another child to the mix. And one that we got to give back to somebody at some point in time.
Yeah.
Like why fostering?
Yeah, it's an amazing question that probably anyone who knows us would ask why. And you're the least likely person to foster. I'm an only child. I never babysat. No one would entrust me with their child as a teenager, that's for sure. We had to live, Cynthia, we had a nanny who lived with us for 6.5 years in corporate America, when I was in corporate America, really helping raise our kids and really kind of raise Doug and I. But I will tell you that I watched a woman on stage talk about what she had done. We have this business that we have this that it's given us income and time that I didn't have before. And I watched a woman who is in my same business on stage, and she told the story of how she had brought a little boy home, and he was someone that he was labeled in the system just unadoptable. And they brought him home from another country, and they live in Orlando, Florida. And she said, he was about 4.5 years old, and she was driving the car, and he was in the back seat, and she said this little voice came from the back seat, and he said, "Mommy, what took you so long? I waited for you forever."
Wow.
And I just thought, wow. And I remember that I had prayed. I'm a Christian man. I had prayed this prayer that I had watched this sermon someone had sent me. And it was like the boldest prayer you can ever pray is, God, use me. And I was like, you know what? That is a bold prayer. And it said, expect that, the things that are going to present are going to be things that you're going to be like, I'll take a different assignment. And I just remember just being struck by what she had said, just that I had waited for you forever. And I just thought, wow. And there was a woman that used to come to our house in our business that had an 18-month-old son that she was fostering. And my kids would just call him Baby Gabriel. And he was the size of a 9-month-old. He wasn't a baby, he was 18 months old, but he had been born addicted. And my kids really were exposed. And I called Doug from the hallway of that event, and I was just so overwhelmed by the story and just thinking of these kids that are waiting, feeling like they're waiting forever, for a home. And I just said, Doug, you know what? I feel like this mission that I'm watching this woman in our business, I feel like we should look into this. And Doug, what our life is like. So you've known us for a long time. I mean, he should have said, are you crazy? And he just said, you know what? I'm in. Let's do it. And then we talked about it for a while. He was finishing his doctorate and we're attempting to finish it. And I remember Avery saying to us, saying like, we're going to wait. We're going to go through the training. It's going to take a long time and we're going to slow play this. And her saying, Mom, if not us, who's going to do this? And if not now, when? When is a better time to do it? And I remember looking at her, and at the time she was probably maybe 8 or 9 years old, and just thinking, if that 8 or 9-year-old can understand that, she's right. Why not us? Why couldn't we do it? Who else is doing it? And when you start looking behind the curtain of what the need is, you're ready to step up.
I think that's, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that your kid was aware enough of the bigger picture to say, like, have like a sit down, Mom, like, Mom, here's the deal.
Yeah.
We're doing this. And they're like, okay, we just made a decision off an 8-year-old's opinion, but awesome. And I think that's, you talk about Christianity, and people know that I'm a faith-based guy, and I'm not necessarily a church guy. I'm the stepson of a pastor, so you can only imagine how much church I was exposed to growing up. But there comes a point in time in every person's life when they hit a crossroad, and the life that they were living got them to a certain point, and there's a door that opens, and they have a choice to stay in the current path or open that door and go. And it's always a God-driven event, in my opinion. It's not the lottery. It's not, it's a moment where if you're wise enough and you have your heart open enough, you're going to see it. Mm-hmm. And I tell the story all the time about when I went through my 13 years of depression after my brother died. that I saw nothing and I felt nothing. Like I wasn't seeing anything. I just was going and doing and sort of living whatever course I was on and hiding all the demons I was carrying. And then when I was shown grace that day, when my grandmother gave me that quilt of my brother's clothes after my son was born, that sort of unlocked this darkness inside of me and let it all out. And the things that I see now that I've been seeing since 2002 and the decisions I've been making have all been towards this path that God's laying out for me for a reason. Like there's definitely a reason why all this is happening. And I see it when I just let it be and I let God control this, amazing things are happening. And this isn't a sitting on a pulpit preaching kind of thing. This is just, I'm allowing my heart to be taken over by something greater than myself. And I think that's what you're doing when you give your heart to its strange baby and you just pour it in, and you have, there's 5 of you. So they get 5 hearts pouring into it. Amazing things can come from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And people say, how, I think the most, that I've talked to you about this, that the most common question people say is, how can you give these kids back? Right.
Yeah.
And so what I say to them is when we accept custody of a child, what we've done is we've just prayed as a family, God, give them the parents they deserve. And so when he answers, how can you be upset? Right? I prayed for this. Like, he's getting the parents he deserves, or she's going to go back to the parents they deserve. And also, I think once you understand what the need is, you subvert what do my feelings matter when these kids are just in a crisis, in total trauma and uncertainty?
Now, let me ask you this, because I honestly don't know a whole lot other than through you guys about the foster system. And I know I've had some friends that went into foster when I was growing up, but I didn't really ask any questions because it was too weird for them and awkward for me to ask. But what with the system itself, because I guess we got to look at it from a systemic question, is the system a system that works because of people like you, or is it a system that gets lucky when it gets people like you?
Well, I'll say this. I think that the system has gotten a bad reputation. There's been all these, horror stories, of course, of multiple foster homes, and I personally can speak for Montgomery County, where we live, and just say I am so impressed with all the things that they've done. Pennsylvania has done first home, last home initiatives. You accept a placement, you're going to do everything you can to make it work, right? And Pennsylvania is going to support you in a lot of different ways. And I think that we've done, oh my gosh, Montgomery County we had our largest class graduate this weekend, Saturday, of new foster parents, but so many more are needed. And people aren't talking about it. I probably to the chagrin of some people who don't appreciate my social media.
Trust me, I hear the same stuff. So.
You can appreciate that. So, but I'll say that I talk about it because who is talking about it? I mean, you're a police officer, right? So people see these arrests. You look at the police blotter and you look at these arrests and you see these people are 20 and 30 years old. Many of them have children. What happens? We've taken placements where the child watched their parents be arrested, 2 of them, where their parents were arrested in front of them and we took custody of them. And there's a lot that I've learned that, I thought that we were going to be, when we got into it, I thought we'd be a bridge. Like, oh, mom's going to go and have a baby in the hospital. We'll just take this kid for the weekend.
Right.
And that's not what it is. I thought that kids would be grateful and happy to be out of a situation that's really uncertain and unstable and traumatic. And here's what I've learned. And this is really the truth, is no matter what you come from, people yearn for their mom and dad. No matter what kind of craziness they have, it's irreplaceable.
Right.
We had an amazing brother and sister that he would cry at night for his mom and dad, yet he would tell us that they would sometimes not eat dinner. They would, if there was something in their pantry to eat, if not, they hoped the neighbor would invite them over to play because maybe they'd offered them something to eat. And then they lived in, Matt, if you ever knew where they lived, you would fall over because people think that kids in foster care are coming from these really poverty-stricken areas. Nah, this was in a local school district and in an area where I ran past the home, in-ground pool. It's not just in poverty-stricken areas. It is a massive need.
So what is if somebody like, I think we can take this moment and we can actually open up a doorway for someone who wants to become a foster, whether they're listening locally here in Montgomery County or anywhere else. How does one decide, outside of obviously wanting to give of their heart, how does one decide that they want to become a foster parent, and what do they do?
Yeah. So every county has a children and youth, right? You can Google your county, and then just your municipality's page will tell you when the next training is, or it'll allow you to click for information. So in Montgomery County, we just wrapped up a training session. That's the first step. People get paperwork, they fill it out, and it's anything you'd expect, right? They want to know who you are and what you're about. They want references. If you have children, they want to know your children are on board. You own or rent your home, those kinds of things that you'd standard kind of paperwork. Then you go through training, and it's the first night. I think they deliberately make it heavy, because if it's not for you, this isn't for you. But I think people can get involved. But here's what I think, Matt, is that I'm passionate about foster care. Not everybody, that's not going to float everybody's boat. It's not their wheelhouse. It's not something that wakes them up in the morning. But I believe that when we start talking about, people can do a little bit more. That if we just all did a little bit more, there's a lot of ways to get involved. I talk a lot on social media about different volunteer opportunities that I find. We volunteer at a soup kitchen some Monday nights. There's awesome soup kitchens around, and families go. All my kids, not our newborn, but all the kids go. Even our 2.5-year-old goes. And one of the things that I love is that my kids will go and say, these kids that are there, they don't know if my kids are there as recipients or as volunteers. And I love that. Avery always tells me, Mom, I have to go back next Monday. They're counting on me. And they want to see me because they think that's their friend. They don't see her as a worker. But that is something you can do. Go and just sit and talk to people. Go and contribute food. Go do something like that. There's a Cubbler program. A lot of these, as we have more opioid addicted babies where mom's off getting treatment, or, mom and dad are somewhere where they can't be present for their baby. These babies are going through hell. And sometimes there's their whole, they're overwhelmed. So have a volunteer program. They can be watch the kids for an overnight. So there's so many things people can do, and I think people just don't know. They just need someone to say, you know what, we could do a little bit more. Instead of a little more Netflix, let's do a little bit more. To go to Wawa and see somebody that's getting a coffee, just a coffee only, and pay for it, and just see what that does. It's a cool feeling. My kids and I will go out and do that, and they'll be stalking around the people in Wawa. And if you're getting a sizzly, a donut, a pack of gum, they're getting behind you, because we're only paying for coffee, right? They're cheap, right? They only have $1 coffee days, so they've got to get there and only coffee, no cigarettes, no donuts, nothing else. But just go and pay for the person that is in line behind you, and just see their face and what it does.
And it's cool because a lot of the kids are mine included, are involved in National Honor Society and other things where they have to have community service projects and get involved. I think one of the coolest things you can do, and I do it with in my own life. And let me back up. I believe leadership in and of itself is the simplest thing you can do, and it's portrayed as this very difficult thing to do. It's portrayed as this hierarchy of pantheons of amazing people, MacArthur and Schwarzkopf and the president and CEOs of companies. And that's really bullshit. That's not what it is. It's simply spending time to help someone else find success. And success is determined in a billion different ways. And it could be buying coffee for somebody, and that's a success in their life, that they feel better about themselves, that you did something positive for another person. And that's all leadership is. So going out into schools, when I go into schools, I love sharing that type of messaging, that servant leadership mentality, because it's really all it is. It's not hard. And the cool thing is you can do it as many times a day as you want.
Right.
And it feels good. And people are like, oh, that's not selfless. If you're bullshit, if it feels good to me, it's going to feel good for them.
Yeah.
Everybody's winning here. This is a full circle win. If I'm doing something to help somebody and I want to do that because I want to see them happy, and in turn it makes me happy, I'm going to do that 50 times a day if I can.
Yeah.
And when you get a kid to do that, and that's the hardest part, is when you get a kid to just take that first step and do that one thing that makes someone else feel good and they in turn feel good, it becomes this cycle. And it's like they want to keep feeding that monster. And I don't care what anybody says. If you create a kid that wants to feed that monster, that kid's going to be great. And that's because that's not a drug. That's a drug inside of you. That's dopamine. But I mean, it's a real thing.
Yeah, I agree. Just start smiling at people. I just think that is just create a ripple effect. I'm fascinated by the ripple effect. When you start smiling at people, it's almost inevitable that they smile back. And then what does that do? Like, what kind of ripple? It eventually boomerangs back to you.
I do speaking of the Wawa, I do a 60-foot rule that I will hold the door for 60 feet. So if somebody's walking from the gas pumps, that's about 60 feet. And I see them walking, I'll stand there and hold the door. And they're looking at me like, what the hell? Who's he waiting? Like, they're waiting for the other person that I was holding the door from to appear. And then they walk on and like, have a good day. And they're like, did you really just wait to hold the door for me? I'm like, absolutely. I saw you were coming. I'm not in a hurry. It's my pleasure to hold the door. And they're like, no one's ever done that before. And now it's in their head.
Right.
I love doing it.
It changes the state, right, of them and you. It's another, like every morning, I like habits, right? I have habits of what I do every day. And so one of the things that I do is I leave people birthday voice messages. And so I was razzing a friend of ours that we both know, and because one of our greatest friends, and he wrote on my Facebook wall, HBD. And I just said, but I mean, honestly, could you really take the time? HBD on my wall. And I was just saying to Doug, I said, it's in an HBD world. We got this culture of HBD. We're in such a hurry that we're just not taking the time. So that in an HBD world, every morning I try to send people a voice message on Facebook to say happy birthday to them with a message that I thought of them. You know, if it's you, I'm saying, Matt, how many swim meets did I stand next to you? How many times did I razz Doug about his lifting weights with you? And really, are you guys just listening to rap music and BSing the whole time? But like, how many memories I have of you? And I think that is one of the greatest gifts you can give someone. Remember them. My dad died when I was 20. We didn't really talk about that, but he passed away when I was 20. I picked him up
on the topic of discussion.
Yeah. He picked me up at college in May. He was driving me home and he just told me he had cancer. They had found cancer, and it was my dad, well, I'll tell you, when he died 2 days after he turned 51 that July. So he was only sick for a few months. And the line to stand at my dad's funeral was unbelievable. My dad worked in a trucking company, but the reason was he was the kindest, most generous person. And truly, I don't say that just to memorialize my dad. Like, the line for my dad's view, and he wasn't an influencer by any stretch of the imagination. He worked at Yellow Freight Trucking Company, but if you met him, he cared for you. I remember coming home and he was he was so distraught. And I was like, Dad, what happened? I knew he was sick. What happened? And he had to let go of our exterminator. He was getting we had an exterminate. We had a contract with an exterminator, and the guy owned a business. He was a local guy. And my dad was just he felt so terrible that he had to let this guy, this contract go with the guy who's a local company. That's like the kind of person he was, that he had such a deep heart for people. And I think that showed me just a little bit. My dad was good to people, and people showed up, people came from hours to drive to be at his funeral and stand outside. You know, it was July. It was hot. They wrapped around a little church on Glasgow Street in Stowe, just to honor the goodness that he put in the world. You wouldn't hear him. People would say, I never heard your dad say a bad thing about anyone. Never. Not even our exterminator. Like, loved our exterminator.
Well, it was on my mind to talk about your dad, but we're here now. So I gave a talk the other day to a company, and I usually black out for an hour when I talk, and I don't remember anything I say. So thank God every once in a while I get someone to videotape it. And one of the things I mentioned, which I didn't remember talking about, was my brother's funeral, and how a kid that never, he had autism and stuttered, and never had anybody call the house and ask if he can come out and play, never had a sleepover, never was invited to a birthday party ever in the 18 years that I was alive with him. And at his funeral, there were 1,000 people. And my family's messed up. We don't have a whole lot of connectivity. And so there wasn't many people that were like our family there. And I just kept remembering, and I was pretty messed up after he died. And I was in a fog, but I do clearly remember thinking, who the hell are all these people? And then it wasn't until after 13 years later when I wrote the book that I realized that the people that showed up to my brother's funeral were the people that he connected with every summer at the Camp Nava when he worked there, that I wasn't a part of. I wasn't in that part of his world. And every summer he would connect with these people, the parents, the kids that came, the special needs kids that came, the staff that, there were some that were every year and some were new every year. And these were all the people that showed up for my brother. And I didn't know they existed. I mean, I met them, but I didn't know who they were. And it wasn't until I wrote the book when people were, messaging me saying, I named my son after your brother. I met him at Camp Nava, or they built a gym and named it after my brother. And it reminded me of why we live life. We don't live life for us. It's not about me, my life. It's not about you and your life. It's about what people will think about and what will they remember when we're not here anymore. Yes. And when I was at this talk, that the CEO of the company said, "You die twice." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You die when you die, and then you die a second time when your name is uttered for the last time." And that's real. And I don't ever want my brother's name not to be mentioned again, nor do I ever want my name to not to be mentioned again. And I think, when you talk about your dad, how long ago was that? 20 years ago?
Yeah. 20 years ago.
Still saying his name. And I think that's important.
Yeah, 20 years ago, 21 years ago. Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah, it is. Legacy. I think it is. I think it matters so much. We're creating a legacy because we're raising kids that, they'll carry this on. So one of the twins is my dad to a T. People say, that parents will call us and say, like, I really liked having him over. He's a grateful kid. He's so nice. He always wants to make people feel good. And I think, like, that's not me. That's my dad. That's DNA stuff. He has that inside of him. So
and that's a reminder. I see pieces of my brother and my son, and it's just a reminder of the magnitude of, when you share stories about your dad, kids pick everything up. Yeah. Like they remember everything.
Yeah.
And I think when you share openly about grief or about joy or whatever it is you're sharing openly about, I think there's certainly stuff that triggers that DNA component to activate, right? Yeah. Something inside their brain activates. My son does some amazingly caring things that on his own that I'm like, where the hell did that come from?
Right.
But I remember telling him stories when he was little, just laying in bed with him about his Uncle Andy. And just, this is the stuff that just sort of comes back full circle. Yeah. And it's cool.
And then my mom ended up on a widow and widower's chat room in AOL. If you remember, AOL had the chat room.
Yep.
And I told you, I'm an only child. We lived this life. She married to my dad for a lot of years. And she was on this chat room. She found these friends that could relate to what she was going through. And she met this man who was a friend, and he had lost his wife and had 3 little boys, and had lost his wife suddenly in the night, aneurysm. And he lived in Chicago. And, some people that know me know my stepdad, Bob. And Bob, she met on a chat room, lived out in Chicago. We thought there wasn't a time when you met people online. We thought Bob's going to be a mass murderer. He's, how could you meet somebody on the AOL chat room? And I'll tell you what, they found this common connection through grief. And my kids wouldn't believe you that that's not their grandfather. I mean, he is the greatest. He's the greatest. And so he's cared for my mom, so deeply cared for my kids. So it's like, really, my dad created such a loss in me I didn't deal with, but like we just were sent this great. My mom married Bob, and he's Poppy. My kids would be shocked to, they know, my dad passed, but to them that's family. When people come into your life, they become family.
And I think, your mom needed that, obviously, to help her heal and transition and all that kind of stuff. And similarly, my mom remarried when I was 12, and I hated my stepdad. I did not want a stepdad. I didn't want to have, I was having issues with my biological father anyways. And He didn't really ever come see us, and that was dealing with why was that happening, and what were we doing wrong. And then I have this new guy who wants to be my dad and marry my mom and create all this weirdness in my life, and I just didn't want it. But as obviously I got older, and our relationship has obviously blossomed and changed, and he's been he's basically the savior of our family, and takes good care of my mom, and my mom's had some major health issues, and he's 12 years younger too, so than my mom. So I don't think this is how he expected everything to turn out, as everybody was getting older. But he's a stick and stay guy. And my kids didn't know about my biological father until 2010, maybe. And my daughter was 12 by the time I let her know that I actually have a father, and it's not Pop or grandfather, So, it had to happen. And I never want my biological father ever return, because there's no need. Like, there's not a value that he would bring to this equation 30 years after it happened. So having that other person like Poppy is important.
Yeah.
It's important to have for your kids somebody that they can look up to and admire and see where they want to go to.
Yeah.
Like, who do they want to aspire to become? And it's cool that he came into your life.
So lucky. Yeah.
Let's talk about Doug.
Yeah.
How did you guys meet?
Okay, if you ask our kids, we met at church. We actually met at the Trap Tavern.
Lauren and I met at Reed's. So
yeah, same owners.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, we met at the Trap Tavern, and I was just about to move to New York City, and my cousin and I, like the one that was kind of raised like the sibling I never had, we were right there. We had just gotten back from the beach, and I said, let's just go. It used to be a coin. You could, for 1 hour on Sunday nights, you could get a drink for a coin. And then I was there with Doug, and he walked in with someone that was an old friend of mine, and we just met there. I was about to move, and I just thought, this guy is really obnoxious, and I'm sure he thought the same of me.
I can imagine Doug in like an old East Stroudsburg T-shirt that's kind of like sweat stained with the rip in the collar or something, and a pair of like jeans with like a tear in the seam, and a pair of sneakers going out to the bar.
That could have been the outfit he had on. You were probably right. Yeah. And he owned a townhouse. I remember my cousin being so impressed. This guy owns his own townhouse. I mean, we were probably 21 or 22 years old.
And Doug was
7 years older.
And where was he? Was he at Dana Boone then?
He was at Glen Mills Schools.
Glen Mills. Okay.
Yeah, so he worked with court adjudicated youth.
So for reference, Doug is an educator, and has been with Springford for at least 10 years, probably, right?
Yeah, a little more.
A little more. And he's a good all around manly dude that just, like, if you want to have a hangout buddy that enjoys sports, enjoys beer, likes to talk a lot of smack, doesn't mind lifting some weights, and can crack jokes, then he's like your dude. He's the guy. And I've been blessed to do that every Tuesday for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
With Doug. And we have a good time, and he's strong as a house. And I know he adores you, and he adores the kids. And it may not always be perfect and rosy as it appears on social media.
Yeah.
In life, just for anybody.
Totally.
But I think you guys wear your scars just as beautifully as you do your beauty marks.
Yeah.
And I think it's a testament to your guys' relationship, to the fact that you trust each other. And I think Lauren and I have something similar in that, more so her than me. She allows me to be me. Mm-hmm. It doesn't put limitations on me, doesn't box me in, understands that I'm out there all the time. And when I get an idea, I'm probably going to do it regardless. So she saddles up and she supports me. And I see that more in Doug doing that for you, because you're more of the outside the box, what can I get into type person than he is. And I think that's pretty cool.
I mean, listen, I walked away from a great job to take a chance on something. And I mean, he's just like, okay. We went down to the shore when we were, gosh, I was probably, well, the year we got married, a couple of months after we got married. And we just said, let's take a drive down the shore. We came back with a 2-bedroom condo. We've done a lot of impulse. Like he's been okay with impulsive stuff, but I try to be real because honestly, people look at the highlight. I look at the highlight reel of people on social media and go, "Wow, Doug's getting gypped in the love department. Our life sucks. I'm a horrible mom. I can't cook." And I just try to be real. Like, listen, we went through a terrible, terrible time in our marriage. We went to this Imago. I can't say enough good things about it. It really was a big shift in our relationship, but it's called Imago, Imago. And I'll tell
And
you
what the
what,
hell
it
is that?
breaks you down. What's that?
What the hell is that?
It like really talks about just, we're shaped so much by how we're brought up, how people talk to us, what we've experienced in our life, and that comes out. And you're not necessarily talking to Doug who's 48, you're talking 47, you're talking to somebody who was like disappointed as a child, or when I do this, it reminds you of that. And it's some stuff that it's good. We learn so much that I feel like I'm sure he applied to his job. I know I applied to our business, that just mirroring and just things that really were good, but it made us, it was a turning point in our marriage. And I say to people, like, I try to tell people, like, I am horrible at most things. Terrible. Like, I can't clean this house, keep it clean, cook, bake. Terrible. Parallel park. The kids probably think I'm an okay mom. I'm doing a lot of things that we should probably prepay for therapy. But I try to keep it real and tell people, like, it's generally a pretty hot mess.
Yeah, you say that a lot. And I mean, I've seen the chaos.
Yeah, it's a lot.
I've seen you not all dolled up, and I've seen the kids, putting on clothes, getting out of the car, and
Totally.
but if everybody acknowledges in the unit that that's just normal,
Yeah.
then it's not abnormal.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? What's normal for one family may not be normal for another. We're very, my wife is the most structured, list driven, time driven. Like, it's funny. So I make fun of her all the time. My son, if we're driving him to school in the morning, I say, "What time we got to leave?" And I know the answer, but I love hearing her say it. She'll like 7:09. I'm like, 7:09, not 7:10, not 7:08, not 7:12. No, well, 7:09, because that's what time it gets in. But we have to wait for the bus. The buses are crossing at this point in time, at this time. And so she has everything planned out, which is the complete opposite of me, which I have nothing planned out. And I do everything by the seat of my pants. So she keeps everything grounded. Like, but if I would literally let my wife pass or left me, and I was responsible for the day-to-day care of my children, they would be in foster care. Because I forget stuff. I forget. I left a kid in a car once. And I was in there, and I walked into Wawa, and I'm like, what am I missing? Shit, kid. Like that's me. I'm just constantly a million miles an hour. So she is the rock that keeps it together.
Yeah.
And I think in any relationship, any successful relationship, if everybody was the same, or operated in the same level, it would just be constant chaos.
Yeah.
So I think, what Doug is for you and you for Doug, Lauren and I are that way with each other. And by the way, I don't normally do the Facebook thing, but I'm going to introduce you to my buddy, Tad Doyle, who just left a message on Facebook. But,
nice. I think his sister lives in my neighborhood. One of the most.
Yeah, she did. They did.
Time.
Yep.
Yep.
So let's
Joe's twin.
Yep. Let's wrap this up. And I just want to first of all say, hopefully this was not what you expected, but pleasantly surprised how it went. I wasn't sure what we were going to talk about. I had a couple key things that I knew about you that I was interested in learning more about, that I thought everybody would be interested about. But we talked about some stuff that I had no idea what we were going to talk about. So I think you did an amazing job. I think you always do an amazing job. If anybody wants to know more about you, where can they, other than social media, where can they find you?
Where can they find me? Probably, I guess we can drop my email address. We can put that in the comments.
Yep, I'll put that in
But
there.
yeah, following me on Instagram or Facebook, I think is a good way to. I think those are good ways to just get to know what I'm pretty open about what I'm about on
Yep,
those platforms. You know, I've talked a lot about contribution and foster care and our business and wellness, and I talk about a lot of things. So those are probably good ways to see what I'm about.
good idea. I think we should plug Isagenix because we really didn't plug it. And I'm not part of Isagenix, even though Jess has tried.
You should be. Keep it
I
open.
know
Keep
that.
the door open.
I appreciate what the business is doing for you.
Yeah.
And how it's impacted your life and impacted your family's life and impacted the
Yeah.
lives of many others. So for that, I love Isagenix.
Thank you.
And I love what you do with it. And so is there a group, Facebook group that people can go to learn more about what you're doing with your team?
Yeah. So the page we run on Facebook is called Team Win, WIN Testimonials. That's a good page. People can click to join that page and see see some of the results and the clinical studies and things like that. Matt, I'm never the person to say it's the only way for people to get healthy. But for a lot of people, it's that astounding. It's the clinical results are pretty indisputable. It's an amazing vehicle for people to shift their body into a new state. So we believe in it. I took a huge leap of faith that we would go out and tell the world about it, impact people, help people create a totally up-level, different state of being. So that's really what we're up to.
Well, I love it. I love the fact that you're appearing on stages across the world, sharing your story and impacting lives. And at the end of the day, the vehicle by which you change lives, I don't really care. All I care about is that we're taking that vehicle and using it to help others. And whether you're a preacher, a teacher, a candlestick maker, or an Isagenix mega star, I don't think it really matters as long as we're out there changing the world in a positive way.
I love it.
So this has been another edition of the 2 Dates in a Dash podcast. I am, again, your host, Matt Cubbler, and my special guest today was Jess Regner. Once again, if you're into fostering, please go to your county website and find out how you can make a difference in a child's life. Same thing with adoption. And for God's sakes, go out there and be kind to one another. Have a great day, guys.